This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. Giant monolithic corporations like Transclunk and BC Ferries and ICBC are not my favorite institutions in what purports to be a democratic society. And it's always fascinated me the way these giant creatures who eat up so much of our lives, I guess I could throw in TELUS and BC Hydro, they get very jittery if someone doesn't, sing from their hymn book. Most recent case, and by the way, I was just advised by our floor director just before we came on the air, apropos of last week's show on Transclunk, I just learned that the CEO has said, bye-bye, baby, bye-bye. Well, have a nice severance package. Back to ICBC. So, a private company decided, I know what we can do. We can help people deal with ICBC, and we can create a website and some books and some pieces of paper and so on that might help. And they created this thing, and it's called ICBCadvice.com. Well, it says very clearly, if you look, I think we're showing it right now, it says, ICBC is prepared. Are you? Would you mistake that for something owned and run by ICBC? And it says in plain English, this site is not an ICBC affiliate and so on. Nevertheless, ICBC, with its billions in reserve, I guess, have taken these small folks to court like 96 times, including to the Supreme Court of Canada, and once again have lost. And so maybe finally they'll be quiet, but we hope our guest won't. Wes Mussio is one of the principals of ICBCadvice.com. Did I get that right?
I'm actually the lawyer for them.
Yes.
I don't own the company.
Okay. Now, the folks who own the company, what's it called, Stainton?
Stainton Ventures Ltd.
Stainton Ventures. So do they do other things, or is this their main, this is their big push?
It's their main thing. It was put out as a volunteer, sort of help the community type website. It's a nonprofit website, and it was done in 2006. And then it's sort of carried on with much litigation thereafter, courtesy of ICBC.
but you do sell some things. I mean, you sell e-books and books and yes.
Not for profit though. The books are sold at if you want to download it, it's $1.99.
I noticed that.
And then if you want one shipped out, it's $5.99, which does not cover the shipping and the cost of production. So it's it's a non-profit
cheap. Okay.
And it was done originally by Penny Stain Mussio, because she's one of these people that volunteers for everything, and she wanted to put out good information to the public because she was listening to my stories about ICBC as a lawyer for doing ICBC claims against ICBC. She thought it was unfair that people were not knowledgeable on how ICBC can handle them in a claim situation.
Now, Wes, I've been very lucky in the few instances that I've rubbed up against the corporation. I've been treated very fairly, very reasonably, with dispatch. I mean, things happen fairly quickly and so on. But I think that's rare. I know that there are hundreds of thousands of unhappy people. Give me, just off the top, the wackiest story you can think of.
Well, I've seen situations where ICBC gets a self-represented claimant that has I saw once where their person was a quadriplegic and they offered $5,000 to settle the claim, and the guy almost took it because he was destitute, yet the claim was worth several $1 million. So, I mean, that's an extreme situation that I saw in one case. But,
that's unbelievable.
Sometimes ICBC, there's a lot of good adjusters, but there's some that are not as good, and they take advantage of people, and that's the purpose of this website, is to prevent that taken advantage of by adjusters that may want to do that, unfortunately.
The website is free, and it covers a huge range of topics. I mean, one could swim on that website for a couple of days. Personal injury, vehicular damage. I didn't notice, and maybe it's just because I gave it a cursory look, a third party, because that's the part that would most frighten me, is claims by third parties. So you must have some advice on that.
Yes, it does. Like what you usually talk about is third party liability if somebody sues you, and then what happens. So it does talk about that.
Yes.
You know, that ICBC is supposed to jump in and defend you if you caused fault to somebody else and they were injured or their vehicle's damaged.
Are you coming from a particular belief system about ICBC? I mean, do you have you have a contentious relationship with them, but it suggests to me that you see them in a certain way, which I think many people do. You see them as people who are trying their darndest to give you as little as possible.
Well, some adjusters are definitely like that. Others aren't. They're very caring.
Yes.
So it's, the problem is you've got thousands of adjusters, and it's the luck of the draw. Sometimes you get a really difficult adjuster that wants to basically give you nothing as a claimant. Yes. Other times you get ones that really care. Yeah. So it's the problem. The corporation doesn't really have a standardized system of adjusting. It's quite individual. And that's so you don't know where you're going to go.
I'm not understanding what you're saying at all. I mean, I understand the words, but there must be some approach to how we deal with customers.
Not at all, because in the hundreds of files that my law firm has that
Yes.
deal with against ICBC, when you get the file from the adjuster, it's
Yes.
a wide variety of approaches. Some are very mean and won't pay for anything. Others pay for everything.
Well, let me start at the beginning. Suppose I want to be, God forbid, an ICBC adjuster. How do I get this gig? What tests do I have to pass? Don't I have to show that I'm part of the team?
I don't know. I've never been involved in that. I was a defense lawyer for ICBC my first 10 years of my practice. In the last 14 years, I've been doing nothing but going against them.
Yeah.
But in my experience, they do screen, and get decent people, hopefully, to be adjusters. But the problem is, like anything, if you meet one person, they could be a very difficult person to get along with.
Right.
Others are really nice.
Yes.
And that's the problem right now. So the horror stories come out of those difficult adjusters, unfortunately.
And do you believe that there's a corporate mandate to be as tough as possible? Do you think that the message is passed down?
Well, I know there's policies and procedures in place that limit authority of adjusters. So, and I know that because I've got a Freedom of Information document supporting that. So there is a certain limit some adjusters at certain claim centers can offer, and yet that limit isn't even close to what the claim's worth.
You personally make the largest part of your living from challenging ICBC.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. So you've got stacks of files. Well, this is old-fashioned. They're mostly on the internet, I suppose.
Yes.
Of people saying, "Look, I'm being screwed here. I can't breathe. These people are killing me. My car's a wreck. I can't get to work." Yes.
Definitely. I mean, the one advantage, I know recently ICBC has been trying to minimize the number of people going to lawyers, but nonetheless, they still, in the large majority of cases, offer too low of an amount to settle claims, and therefore people go off to lawyers. And so I do very well in my business because of ICBC's approach to not pay full value to self-represented people.
Do you have a rough estimate of, would you say 10% of all claimants end up with lawyers, or 20%? Or?
The last stat I saw was something in the range of 70% of all injury claims go to lawyers.
70%?
Right. I mean, it might be a different stat, but that's the last one I saw.
That's unbelievable.
Well, it's the way the system's being created. If you set minimum policy, or I should say limits, how much authority do you have to give to claimants, then what happens is, basically it's easy for a lawyer to get a hold of a client and say, I can get you a lot more, and they will.
Well, let me take the flip side of this whole story, and let's take us to the fortune cookie with Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon, which was all about making up a claim. Certainly ICBC must have a sort of, part of their work must be, look, let's watch out for people who are making up goofy,
Yeah.
whiplash at 1 mile an hour sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a problem. I mean, they teach or they treat everyone the same. There's going to be some very legitimate people that have serious injuries from minor collisions, but then you're going to have a bunch of people that are a little bit faking it to get money. So that's the problem they have. They have to treat everyone as one, and so they they do definitely investigate and make sure people aren't lying about their claim.
In criminal law, a criminal lawyer for the defense will say, I'm not interested in whether or not my client did this or didn't do it. My job is to defend him or her, okay? Do you have to take the same position, or do you say to some people who come to you, look, you didn't hurt yourself, what are you talking about?
Yeah, as a lawyer, you can't put a person on the stand that you know is going to lie.
Yes.
So if I have reason to believe my client's lying, and trust me, I have a few of those even at my office right now, I tell them straight out, you are not telling me the truth. We cannot pursue this claim. And a lot of times people go, oh, okay,
and they look for someone else.
Or no, they don't even look for somebody else. They just carry on. Because there is an unfortunate part that ICBC faces where there's, people are involved in an accident and there's a state of entitlement. People think, I was in an accident, I deserve some compensation, even though they might not.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and you'll see that quite a bit with claimants. Now, there's a lot of legitimate claimants, but there's the odd one that isn't. And my role as a lawyer, and hopefully for all lawyers in this province, is to screen out the bad ones so that you don't advance a negative claim.
And I'm getting the impression from what you're saying that the biggest number of cases for you and the biggest number of contentious issues for ICBC are personal injuries. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Basically, there's not a lot of money in vehicle damage claims for lawyers, so they don't usually get involved in those.
Yes.
But it's the injury claims are.
And is it also because vehicle damage is pretty hard to dispute? I mean, either that headlamp and the front grille is smashed, or it isn't.
Exactly.
That's science. We all have cell phones, so we take pictures when these things happen, right? But in terms of personal injuries, what do you have to do? Do you have to get 14 X-rays and 12 doctors' affidavits?
Well, the difficulty is that with most injuries, there's soft tissue, and there's nothing that you can see objectively on an MRI or a CT scan or an X-ray. So it's all the person says they have a neck problem, and then ICBC probably will not accept the full value of that evidence, and then you have to get reports to prove that it's true.
Yeah, you don't look nearly injured enough. Just step into my garage. I'll fix you. I'll fix you up. Okay. Can we take our breather here now? Is that okay with you? Thank you. Okay. We'll take a little break here. We'll come back in a moment. Our guest is Wes Mussio from ICBCadvice.com. Take a moment out, give you the opportunity to send us a note to davidbernard.com, and opportunity for those lovely people who support us here on Shaw Community Television to say hello. We'll be back with more claims in a minute. This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. If you have the misfortune of an automobile accident, you will probably end up having to deal with ICBC, and if you're like me, that may go fine, but for many, many hundreds of thousands of people, it isn't so fine, and sometimes people just don't believe that you're as injured as you feel you are. You might check out ICBCadvice.com, a nonprofit website that in itself has tons of good things for you to know, but also asks you to pick up one of their small books or e-books, and they're pretty cheap. Wes Mussio is a lawyer who often represents people in these claims, and we should say that the BC Court of Appeal once again said to ICBC, no, we're not going to shut down this website, because it's very clearly they're not you.
Yes, and the Supreme Court of Canada said the same thing.
Yeah, but ICBC, I guess, has enough money to keep going. Yeah, will they stop now?
They don't have any recourse now.
Yeah.
They've gone through 3 court systems, the Supreme Court of British Columbia, BC Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court of Canada, and lost on all 3 fronts, so they have no recourse.
So, on your website, I didn't go to it, but there's a nice heading there. It says top 10 mistakes. It's almost like a Letterman gag, but it's not a gag. It's serious. Can you share with us some of these classic mistakes that people make when they're filing a claim?
Well, one of the classic mistakes is to take the quick money and run before you're recovered from your injury. Because ICBC will often offer out a few $1,000s right off the get-go, hoping somebody needs the money to pay off a credit card bill, and yet the person then 2 years later has quite a significant injury and is off work, and there's no way they can get around it because they've signed a release. That's the one thing I tell people is wait till you're largely recovered before you settle. You've got 2 years to either start a lawsuit or settle with ICBC before you lose your claim. So you got lots of time.
So I didn't know that.
Yes.
I didn't know that you have a 2-year window.
Yes, it's called a limitation period. If you're in an accident January 1, 2013, and you didn't sue the other driver by January 1, 2015, you have no claim.
You're gone.
Yeah, and so a lot of, there is a lot of incentive for people to take early money, and then they come to see me or another lawyer a year or 2 later saying, can I get out of that?
And it is an illusion that it's free money. I mean, that's the part of the problem, isn't it? It's like, I won the lotto.
Well, I mean, you can ask anyone with a significant injury, would they take the money in exchange for this injury, or would they take no injury and no money? And everyone would go no injury, no money. Yeah,
so I came out of a parking lot many years ago in another city, and somebody rear-ended me about like that. I mean, it was almost just barely. And I got out, I looked at the car, I said, nothing, goodbye. There was no conversation about it. Guess what? You know what I'm going to tell you.
Yes.
Within about 48 hours, I started having headaches. Right?
Yeah.
So these things they can take a while to show up.
Exactly. And the one thing, like, people do get in these minor accidents and they just drive away without taking vehicle identification. Then if you do that, you have no claims. But of course, when you're sitting there and you go, it wasn't that much of a deal, and then later you develop some problem because you never know how your body's going to respond to a sudden jolt like that.
Yes. You and I were laughing and joking about Italy before we came on the air. As you are Italian and you go to your family's area so often. In the city of Todi in Umbria a few years ago, someone rear-ended me, and her car was almost accordioned, and my rental car had a scratch on it. And of course, we're dealing with 2 different languages, and I'm doing my best to speak. And the funniest moment of all was when she said, don't go away, my son is coming. And I said, fine. And he drives up, and he gets out of the car, and he goes, sua culpa, sua culpa. It's your fault, Mom. And I said, sua culpa, I like the sound of that. Stick to that. So you always have to take the information, right?
Yes.
And in the day of the cell phone, which is a photo, which is a camera, why wouldn't we?
Well, just because you don't think about it at the time, but if you don't, then you have no claim, and you never know what's going to happen. I've seen cases where in a minor rear-end collision, somebody suffered quadriplegia just because they had a predisposition to a very severe outcome because their spinal column was frail.
Okay.
So you never know. Like, you can't, even if it's a minor accident, you don't know what the long-term impact's going to be. Most of those minor accidents, of course, you're not going to suffer any injury and you'll go on with your life, but you don't know what your predisposition is to that.
The last accident I had happened with me not in the car. I'm playing bridge all day with friends in the south end of the city. I come out at the end of bridge day, and the whole driver's side of my car is scarred. And we can tell by the height, my car is small, that it's a truck.
Yes.
So 86 photographs.
Yeah, exactly.
I had to do it, right?
Right where you are, you take
Yes, right at the moment. No fooling around. Just do it right away.
Yeah.
Okay. What are some of the other classic mistakes that people make?
Well, to settle with a claim with an ICBC adjuster without asking a lawyer, because pretty well every lawyer in town will do a free initial consultation.
Yes.
So give a call to a lawyer and find out what your claim's worth. I tell people candidly, if ICBC is reasonably in the range, I'll say, that's not a bad offer. Take it.
Take it.
And in fact, before I came here,
Yeah.
5 minutes before I left, I sent an email to a lady to that regard. She had a reasonably good offer. I could probably get her more for sure, but
Yes.
but she's at a point where it's in the range. And so, when I was talking earlier about some adjusters being reasonable, there's ones out there that are like that. Others not so much. So find out from a lawyer.
If I'm in an accident and I consult a lawyer, you tell me, because this is your business, what range of fees should I be looking at that are reasonable? Is there a percentage range?
Under the Law Society rules, you can charge up to 33 1/3%.
Wow,
But,
that's a lot.
And a lot of lawyers will charge 30%, and I tell clients that they're crazy to agree to that term, unless it's a very, very, very minor claim, because that could grossly overcompensate the lawyer.
Yes.
What our firm does is charge a rate starting at 20% and going up with a passage of time and more work, which I believe in. And I wrote that in the book, in ICBC advice book, and I got a number of irate lawyers phoning me up saying that I'm, impacting the business of their company. But I am a strong advocate that anyone that signs up clients at 30 or 33% regularly is overcharging the client.
One of the best sponsors I have on this show is the Trial Lawyers Association of BC. Are they going to be mad at you or me because of this conversation?
Sure. But I'm the type of fellow, I say what I honestly believe, and I'll stand by it.
I forgot what I was going to ask you. So you can do very well as a lawyer, but you have to be very judicious, because if you start gouging your clients, you're not going to do very well. Word will get out.
I mean, most of my files all come from word of mouth. So if you don't, if you end up overcharging clients, then they're not going to refer their friends or family members. So it's a vicious circle. I mean, you can probably make more money per file charging more of a percentage, but then you don't get the number of files in.
I have a ridiculous and prejudicial question. Okay. In your experience, is it fair to make these kinds of broad generalizations? Who are the most difficult people to work with, the rich or the poor, the big fancy car driver or the cheap little old car driver?
Well,
can you generalize about things like that?
I can.
Yeah.
Usually, on average, people with lesser means are the ones that have the longer, more protracted, difficult claims, because with a rich person that can move on with their lives, even though they're injured, it's not that much of an impact. But for somebody that's not doing that well in life and is off work, it's a devastating impact. So if you want to do a demographic, definitely the poorer end, they're more difficult cases to run, from my perspective, for ICBC to defend.
And the impact is so terrible.
Tragic.
If you don't have a lot of money and suddenly you're out of work and you depend on that paycheck,
right.
Whereas someone who's well heeled, they go, okay, fine, $1,000, $1,200, whatever the deal is, get me out of here.
Exactly. Well, for a lot of people, they're going paycheck to paycheck, and suddenly they can't work. Yes. And the way ICBC's coverages under Part 7 are, the maximum you can get is $1,200 a month, which for most families to live in Vancouver is impossible. Yes. And they haven't increased that rate for 2 decades, I think. So it's travesty. So people are really behind the 8 ball, and then it becomes a very difficult file for them. So the simple answer is the lower your economic demographics are, the tougher your claim is on average.
Do you have a general sort of rule or approach to the write-off situation? When ICBC says, okay, $1,500, blue book, forget it, move on.
Well, what I suggest to people when that happens, I say, go online and figure out what cars are going for, and if it's a substantial difference, spend $400, get an appraiser to appraise the vehicle, and go through ICBC's arbitration system. So what happens is you can go to ICBC's arbitration system, and if you win, then they have to pay the arbitrator's costs, is what I understand. But sorry, the evaluator's costs. So if they're way off. But usually, my experience has been, and I'm running at my law firm, Mussio Goodman, we got 800 plus files, and very few of those have any real big argument about write-off values. So ICBC generally is pretty good about it.
I remember in the last incident that I had, I think it was that truck scraping the car, ICBC said roughly X. This was their range that they would cover for an auto body shop. And they were very good about telling me, this is auto body shop A, but this auto body shop might do it for $200 less, and they are worth talking to because they're legit and real. And so I did have some working room there, whatever the deal was. I can't remember all the details.
Well, I think now they have standardized rates, like anyone that does ICBC repairs at the repair shop has a standardized rate. So what happens is they do an evaluation now. It used to be ICBC doing all the evaluations. But anyways, the repair shop does them, ICBC signs off, and that's what it is. And so if it takes them, like they'll have standardized number of hours per job, so if it takes them twice as long, then I guess the repair shop eats it.
Wes, we just have about a minute left. Tell me the story about your all-time favorite client. Well, who was the most funniest client you ever had?
Oh, I can't really talk about that because it's confidentiality.
Oh, really?
I've got some good stories, but
yeah. And have you gotten some big awards for people?
Yes, some very, very large ones. I was involved in a few files, one of which that was in excess of $5 million.
Really?
And another one that was over $10 million.
Was that because somebody was injured badly?
One was a death claim with a doctor that I helped a little bit on, and the other one was a fellow or a young boy that was tragically injured. So there is some big claims, but I'm not supposed to talk confidentiality.
We won't have you break that. Anyway, ICBCadvice.com is the site. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, many thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Grazie tanto. Wes Mussio from ICBCadvice.com. He is a private lawyer. Next week, I'm trying to get this doctor who has complained that they don't use all the surgical rooms at Burnaby General, and it's a little difficult to connect with him, but I'm working on it. So who knows who will be here next week, but we will be here. We hope you will be as well here on Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. Thanks and good night.